What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of WAGME TV. We are back this week talking about the new kid on the block, the talk of the town, the new L1 blockchain, Aptos. We're going to give you everything you need to know, the pros, the cons, everything that everyone's saying, and we're going to let you know the question that's on everyone's mind. Aptos versus Sui, who's going to win? Mata, Evan, take us away.
Awesome. So let's start back in time a little bit. Let's start on June 24th, 2021. On that day, Jerome Powell told Facebook that they could no longer continue the Libra project. This was the huge project that Facebook had been working on. It was their stable coin. It was a blockchain that they were building. It was, a huge initiative within Facebook that they were really pushing hard. And essentially, Jerome Powell's ruling was that Facebook creating its own digital currency would create too much power for the company. So by January 2022, Zuckerberg had announced that the project would be winding down. However, by December 2021, two key team members had already started building a new blockchain with the same mission. This was Aptos. So the two founders, Mo and Avery, were two very strategic team members on the Libra or DM project, which was worked as in the strategic partnerships, and Avery was a principal software engineer. In Mo's words, we did not feel right that something like this couldn't make its way to the market, despite all the work they had done. So this was really the mission that they wanted to continue, and they ended up using a lot of the technology that they had built within the Libra project originally. So, obviously the Libra project failed, but there's been a couple interesting child projects that have come out of it. We know of Aptos, and then also recently we did another video on the Sui blockchain started by Evan Chang. So it's really the biggest competitor in the space. And when you look at both of them are started by ex-Facebook, Meta, employees that worked on the DM/Libra project. They're both based on Move, which is a language that is built on top of Rust, Solana's smart contract language. But Sui had some adaptations made to it around storage. We talked about in our last video that the storage within Sui was global storage, but it had a storage fund within it. When you think about it, there's a lot of code or data that's probably on a blockchain that's no longer used. So they're incentivizing validators and nodes to continue to hold this. On the other side, Aptos takes more of a traditional approach, just creating global data storage across all nodes in the network. Theoretically, the TPS is pretty similar, around 130 to 120 transactions per second on both blockchains. You can understand that because both of them are based on the Move language, and so they're pretty similar. On the funding front, we see that Aptos has a ridiculous amount of funding, $350 million, with some big names as their venture firms, FTX and A16Z. So creating a little more context around the Aptos blockchain. So let's start with Move. So Move is that programming language that we talked about. It's centered around scarcity and access control. It really seeks to be safer and a more secure smart contract language compared to Solidity, Ethereum's smart contract language. On Move, we see that digital assets like tokens and smart contracts are represented by resources, so they have ownership. Aptos uses a reputation-based system to update validator rotations. This means that, if you're a good player in this space and you have a significant history, you're going to be continued to be relied on to provide a validation within the network. Furthermore, there's also some interesting features that Aptos brings to the table as well. So they have new secure methods for private key recovery, as well as key rotation system for the wallets that will prevent fraud. A lot of people think that this is a monumental shift in how crypto wallets will work. So that's a pretty awesome feature that we can highlight here. And then finally, this is really something where they think they can bring over Rust developers because it is built on top of it. And so their main play is really, in the NFT GameFi space, where they think they can easily move developers onto the blockchain and the network. And they're able to do this through a really great grant program that they have from all that funding that we just talked about.
I'm curious how big their grant program is. We always talk about like the key for these newer projects is getting the developers on board, right? I'm just curious, given that they raised, what was it, $300 million or something? I'm sure it's like a really, really sizable chunk, but just curious if you have that number.
I don't have that number. I know
possible it hasn't been announced either.
Right. I know they have over 100 projects, or they had over 100 projects on their test net, even before the main net had launched, which I thought was a pretty interesting fact. That's something that is really only going to be propelled if you have that great grant program. I think it's a significant number to be able to attract that type of developer attention for the network.
I think on top of the grant program, one of the things that has been talked about a lot is just the airdropping of APT to early participants in general. I think it got a little bit of flack along the way, right? I think it had, especially from a price action perspective, it was something like 20 million tokens were being airdropped. And so obviously the market didn't like that very much, increasing the supply. They think that there's going to be a lot of sell pressure because of it. And so I don't know if we wanted to pull up a chart specifically, but it did crash a little bit due to this and then sort of recovered, ended up hitting a new all-time high. I mean, the mainnet actually was launched last Monday. And what's interesting is they released the tokenomics the day after they launched, along with some of this news about kind of the airdropping. So you can see right there, I see it pulled up this chart, like it dropped pretty heavily kind of out of the gate here. But then again, right, people are coming back and coming back and coming back, and finally it kind of broke above. And so some of this was probably likely due to some of the hype around the NFTs. I know they released actually a unexpectedly restricted vesting schedule pretty much into November of next year would kind of be that first vesting cliff. And so the thought I think there is there won't be too much sell pressure in kind of the depths of the bear market. Hopefully we're bulling by that time, but no one knows, right? And so the thought would be hopefully that's a convenient place to kind of insert themselves and have that vesting cliff and have a little bit more sell pressure once the crypto bull market is back. So I think those were a couple of the new updates that had happened, right? I thought it was interesting they waited to release the tokenomics. I thought it was interesting that they decided to put out the news that they were airdropping APT to early participants, though I do think that's also important, very similar to that grant program that you had brought up there. So,
do we know where that extra 100, because it says the total circulating supply is 130 million. Do we know where the other 110 million have come from? Or they just like they were just minted at the beginning and then 20 million were airdrops? Is that how it kind of worked? Do we know?
I believe so, yes.
I will say when I look on CoinMarketCap, I see the market cap is around 1.2 billion. So it's ranked 43rd on CoinMarketCap. But the fully diluted market cap is 9.3 billion. I don't know if that's what you guys were just talking about, but that's a significant amount of market cap that hasn't been diluted.
It seems really at this point, right, especially from like an investment standpoint, most of the price action is really coming from speculation, right? I think one thing to be noted is, obviously, as I mentioned, the mainnet launched last Monday. The projected speed would be 160,000 TPS. That's what you said, Evan, right? It was 160?
130.
130,000 TPS. And so what they ended up reporting was speeds as low as 4 transactions per second. Now, before we kind of get into this, right, that's obviously a far cry from 130,000 transactions per second that they claimed it could handle. Something to be noted is that 130,000 is maximum theoretical throughput, right? So this 4 transactions per second, it could be due to multiple reasons, right? It's not necessarily, oh, Aptos lied, but maybe there's really just not that many transactions happening on the network at this time. And so I think a lot of the hype is speculation, which I think is super interesting from Aptos' perspective. It's really taken myself, and honestly, it seems like the community by surprise a little bit, as the rest of crypto equities, all your risk on assets really are either falling or kind of moving sideways in this channel. Aptos, as a pure speculation asset, has just been kind of cruising, right? So definitely been something that I've kept my eye on. It seems like a lot of people have kept their eye on as well. I think with their involvement with Diem, same with Sui, right? It's kind of a unique risk, right? So it's obviously created by developers of a project that was pretty much crushed by regulators around the world, right? So if any of Meta's subsidiaries start to adopt Aptos or Sui, right, that'll raise a lot of red flags with a lot of these organizations that kind of struck that down in the first place. So it is a really unique risk in general with that. Something that I do really like, not just about Aptos in general, but about Sui, is the move language that Evan had mentioned earlier, right? I think it's super important because where some of these EVM compatible chains, they have a lot of exposure to kind of risk of smart contract execution. And what Move is really trying to do is reducing that risk. And it really should be a goal to eliminate a lot of these vulnerabilities, ideally entirely, from smart contracts. So I'm really on board with what that looks like. And I actually didn't know it was built on top of Rust as well, which I think a big thing we talked about in the Sui video was actually pulling developers to be able to kind of learn this new language. So that's actually really good information that I was not aware of.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple other notable features. I hope that I mentioned that, the transaction action execution pipeline and the consensus protocol are actually separate in Move compared to, like a Solidity. So on that front, there's innovation around how different layers are, basically piped together. And then also Aptos is creating a 24-hour epoch, which essentially means that gas for that single day will stay consistent throughout the entire day, hoping to create a little more price stability in their network. So there was this great post, Aptos versus Sui on Substack. It was Abhishek Maran. We'll link to it in the description below. But, really his conclusion around it was that, these are new L1s that are building on a new language. And so it's going to take a while for these networks and these communities to build up. But at the end of the day, they're attacking, the same problem or similar problems that Solana and Ethereum are, with, different features and a different ideology. So, whether these blockchains catch on as much as a Solana or Ethereum, it's still a W. It's still a win for the crypto space because we're creating innovation and trying to solve problems in a different way. So at the end of the day, something to watch. Also, like a big win for the space and trying to problem solve from a different direction.
Very interesting. Very interesting. That's awesome. Honestly, it'll be really cool to see kind of like where this little battle goes. And as always, the boys here at WagMe TV will be dialed in and we'll be keeping everyone updated on the latest and greatest in the new L1 battles. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on Aptos. And apart from that, thank you very much. Signing off, WagMe.